At 14:37 on December 20th, 1943, Second Lieutenant Charlie Brown pulled back on the control yoke of his Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress and felt the aircraft climb sluggishly into cold German sky. Temperature, minus 18 degrees Celsius. Altitude, 3,000 meters. Airspeed, 210 kilometers per hour. The bomber responded slowly, reluctantly, like an injured animal forced to continue running. Brown was 21 years old, 5 feet 10 inches tall, 165 pounds. Pilot with 8 months training. This was his first combat mission as aircraft commander. Mission number 1. First time leading a crew into combat. First time responsible for 9 other men's lives. The B-17 was called Ye Old Pub. Serial number 4231083. Delivered to the 8th Air Force 3 months earlier. Assigned to the 379th Bombardment Group, 524th Squadron, based at Kimbolton, England. 22 previous combat missions. Experienced aircraft. Veteran bomber. But today, Ye Olde Pub was dying. The mission briefing had been clear. Bomb Focke-Wulf Aircraft Factory at Bremen, Germany. Distance from England, approximately 420 kilometers. Flight time, approximately 2 hours each way. Expected opposition, heavy. German fighters based throughout the region. Messerschmitt Bf-109 fighters. Focke-Wulf FW-190 fighters. Fast, maneuverable, deadly. The raid began at 1100 hours. 379 B-17 bombers took off from various airfields across eastern England. They formed into combat boxes, defensive formations, designed to concentrate firepower. Each bomber carried 10 crew members, 13 50 caliber machine guns, and 4,000 pounds of bombs. Brown's aircraft launched from Kimbolton at 11:23. The crew consisted of 10 men. Brown as pilot, Second Lieutenant Spencer Luke as co-pilot, Second Lieutenant Al Sadok as navigator, Second Lieutenant Bob Andrews as bombardier, Technical Sergeant Hugh Eckenrode as flight engineer and top turret gunner, Staff Sergeant Alex Yelisenko as radio operator, Staff Sergeant Sam Blackford as ball turret gunner, Staff Sergeant Richard Petchute as left waist gunner, Staff Sergeant Lloyd Jennings as right waist gunner, and Staff Sergeant Pinky Coulombe as tail gunner. They climbed to 27,000 feet and joined the bomber stream heading east across the North Sea toward Germany. The formation flew tight, each aircraft positioned close to its neighbors, wings almost touching. This tight formation concentrated defensive fire. Any German fighter attacking had to fly through streams of 50 caliber bullets from dozens of machine guns. At 12:45, they crossed the German coast. Anti-aircraft batteries opened fire. Black puffs of smoke appeared around the formation 88mm shells exploding at altitude. Each explosion created a sphere of shrapnel expanding at thousands of meters per second. If shrapnel hit an aircraft, it could puncture fuel tanks, sever control cables, kill crew members. Brown flew straight and level. No evasive maneuvers. Evasive flying broke formation. Breaking formation meant isolation. Isolation meant death. So he flew straight despite the exploding shells, despite the shrapnel, despite the fear. At 13:20, German fighters appeared, approximately 40 Bf-109 and FW-190 aircraft climbing from airfields below. They formed into attack groups and dove toward the bomber formation. The standard German tactic was head-on attack. Fighters approached from directly ahead, flying at closing speeds exceeding 700 kilometers per hour. This gave bomber gunners approximately 3 seconds to track, aim, and fire before the fighter passed. Most gunners couldn't hit a fighter closing that fast, but the fighter's cannon and machine guns could rake the bomber from nose to tail in one continuous burst. The first wave of fighters hit at 13:23. Brown watched them come, small dots growing rapidly larger. Then they were firing. 20-millimeter cannon shells and 13-millimeter machine gun bullets streaking toward his aircraft. The windscreen in front of him suddenly starred as a bullet hit. The plexiglass cracked, but held. His top turret gunner, Hugh Eckenrode, fired back. The twin 50-caliber guns roared. Spent brass casings tumbled through the flight deck. The noise was overwhelming, engines roaring, guns hammering, wind howling through 100 small holes where bullets and shrapnel had penetrated the fuselage. The fighter flashed past, so close Brown saw the pilot's face. Then it was gone, rolling away, diving. Another fighter followed immediately, and another. Wave after wave. At 13:28, a 20-millimeter cannon shell exploded in Ye Old Pub's nose section. The blast killed the bombardier instantly. Shrapnel tore through the navigator's station. Al Sadok, the navigator, took shrapnel in his leg and shoulder. He collapsed, bleeding heavily. At 13:31, another fighter attack, this time from below. The ball turret gunner, Sam Blackford, fired continuously. His twin 50s hammered. But a burst of cannon fire hit the ball turret. Blackford was killed. The turret was destroyed. At 13:34, fighters hit from the side. Waist gunners Richard Peachout and Lloyd Jennings fired desperately. Tracers streaked out from their guns, but return fire from German fighters was devastating. Peachout took a bullet through his shoulder. Jennings was hit in the leg. Both men kept firing despite their wounds. At 13:37, the intercom went dead. Shrapnel had severed the wiring. Brown could no longer communicate with his crew. He had no idea who was alive, who was wounded, who was dead. He flew on, alone in the cockpit, except for his co-pilot, Spencer Luke. At 13:42, they reached Bremen, the target, the factory they were supposed to bomb. But the formation was scattered. German fighters had broken up the tight defensive boxes. Aircraft were dispersed across several kilometers of sky. Each bomber was now vulnerable. Brown opened the bomb bay doors. His bombardier was dead. He would have to drop bombs himself. He lined up on the target visually. At 13:44, he pressed the bomb release. 4,000 pounds of high explosive dropped away. The aircraft lurched upward, suddenly lighter. But the mission was not complete. Now they had to get home. 420 kilometers across hostile territory. Back to England. Back to safety. At 13:48, more fighters attacked. A Bf-109 made a head-on pass. Its cannons and machine guns fired. Rounds hammered into Ye Old Pub's nose. The plexiglass shattered completely. Freezing air at -30 degrees rushed into the flight deck. Charts and papers whipped through the cabin. Brown's oxygen mask was torn off. He grabbed for it, but couldn't find it in the chaos. At 13:51, oxygen deprivation began affecting him. At 27,000 feet, without oxygen, consciousness fades in approximately 30 seconds. Brown's vision tunneled. His thoughts slowed. His hands on the controls became weak. Spencer Luke, the co-pilot, saw what was happening. He grabbed a spare oxygen mask and forced it over Brown's face. Brown gasped. Oxygen flowed. His vision cleared. His strength returned. Luke had saved his life. At 13:54, another fighter passed, this time hitting the tail section. Pinky Coulombe, the tail gunner, was killed instantly. The tail turret was destroyed. The rudder was damaged. control surfaces were shot full of holes. At 1400, they were finally clear of Bremen. But they were alone. The formation had left them behind. Yo Old Pub was too slow, too damaged to keep up. Brown watched the other bombers pull away, getting smaller in the distance. Within minutes, they were gone. Yo Old Pub flew alone over Germany. Brown assessed the damage. Number 2 engine was dead shot out. Number 4 engine was barely running, trailing smoke. The hydraulic system was destroyed. Landing gear couldn't extend. Bomb bay doors wouldn't close. The electrical system was failing, instruments flickering, going dark. The oxygen system was compromised. Several bottles shot through, leaking. The tail section was shredded, control cables damaged, rudder barely responding. 3 crew members were confirmed dead: bombardier, ball turret gunner, tail gunner. 3 were wounded: navigator with severe leg and shoulder injuries, both waist gunners with bullet wounds. The flight engineer, radio operator, co-pilot, and pilot were uninjured but exhausted. The aircraft was dying. Brown knew it. His crew knew it. Every gauge showed systems failing. Every control surface responded sluggishly. The bomber was flying on determination alone. At 1407, Brown made a decision. He would not head directly back to England. The shortest route took them over heavily defended areas, more fighters, more anti-aircraft guns. Ye Olde Pub could not survive another attack. Instead, he would fly north, then west over the North Sea. A longer route, more flying time, but avoiding most German defenses. It was their only chance. At 1415, he turned northwest. The heading indicator barely worked. The compass had been shot. He navigated by the sun, by geography, by instinct. The German countryside passed below. Towns, forests, rivers, enemy territory. At 1423, another problem emerged. Fuel consumption was excessive. The damaged engines were burning fuel much faster than normal. Plus, the aircraft was less aerodynamic with so much damage. More drag meant more fuel burned to maintain speed. Brown calculated quickly. They might not have enough fuel to reach England. At 1430, they crossed into northern Germany. Still over enemy territory. Still vulnerable. But no fighters appeared. No anti-aircraft fire. Just empty sky and the laboring engines. At 1437, Brown descended to 3,000 meters. Lower altitude meant warmer temperature. The crew was freezing at high altitude with the nose blown open. Descending would help. Also, lower altitude meant less fuel consumption. As they descended, passing through 5,000 meters, Brown saw something that made his blood freeze. An aircraft approaching from behind. Fast. Maneuverable. Fighter. Messerschmitt Bf-109. German fighter. Single seat. Single engine. Armed with one 20mm cannon and two 13mm machine guns. Maximum speed, 630 kilometers per hour. Service ceiling, 12,000 meters. This fighter could fly circles around the damaged B-17. Brown watched the fighter approach in his mirror. It closed rapidly from 4 o'clock position. Standard attack angle. The fighter would pull up alongside, match speed, and fire into the bomber's side. Point-blank range. Yo Old Pub had no defense. The waist gunners were wounded, their guns possibly damaged, and even if they could fire, the fighter was too fast, too agile. This was death approaching. Brown knew it. After surviving Bremen, after surviving 30 minutes of fighter attacks, after nursing his dying bomber this far, they would die here, over northern Germany, shot down by a single Bf-109. The fighter pulled alongside, 200 meters away, then 100 meters, then 50 meters. close enough that Brown could see the pilot clearly. The fighter pilot looked at the B-17, looked at the damage, looked at Brown, and did not fire. If you want to see what happened next, why a German ace refused to shoot down a defenseless American bomber, please hit that like button. It helps us share more forgotten stories like this. And please subscribe if you haven't already. Back to Franz Stigler and Charlie Brown. The German pilot flying that Messerschmitt Bf-109 was Oberleutnant Franz Stigler. He was 27 years old, 5 feet 9 inches tall, 170 pounds, experienced pilot with 22 confirmed victories. One more kill would earn him the Knight's Cross, Germany's highest military decoration. He needed one more American bomber, and here it was, crippled, defenseless, easy kill. Franz Stigler was born August 21st, 1915, in Regensburg, Bavaria. His father owned a successful business. His childhood was comfortable, privileged. He attended good schools. He learned English and French. He was educated, cultured, intelligent. In 1937, at age 22, Stigler joined the Luftwaffe. He wanted to fly. He completed flight training in 1938. He was assigned to transport aircraft initially, Junkers Ju-52 cargo planes. He flew supplies, troops, equipment, unglamorous work. But he learned to fly in difficult conditions. He became an excellent pilot. In 1940, Stigler transferred to fighters. He flew Messerschmitt Bf-109 aircraft with Jagdgeschwader 27 Fighter Wing 27. He flew combat missions over France, Britain, North Africa, Italy. He accumulated victories. He shot down British Spitfires, American P-38s, bombers, reconnaissance aircraft. By December 1943, Stigler had 22 confirmed kills. He was an ace, an experienced combat pilot, a skilled marksman, a professional. But he was also something else. He was a man with a code, a man with honor, a man who remembered what his commanding officer had told him years earlier. "If I ever see or hear of you shooting at a man in a parachute, I will shoot you myself." That commanding officer was Gustav Rodel, a legendary German ace. Rodel believed in chivalry. He believed warriors should fight with honor. He believed there were rules even in war. One rule: never shoot a defenseless enemy. Stigler remembered this lesson. He had internalized it. It had become part of who he was. On December 20th, 1943, at 14:37, Franz Stigler was landing at Oldenburg Airfield after a combat patrol. His Bf-109 touched down. He taxied to his parking area. Ground crew began refueling and rearming his aircraft. Then the alert sounded. American bombers overhead. All available fighters scramble. Stigler ran to his aircraft. The ground crew was still refueling, not complete, but close enough. He climbed into the cockpit, started the engine. The Daimler-Benz DB605 liquid-cooled V12 roared to life. 1,200 horsepower. The propeller spun. Stigler taxied fast and took off without waiting for clearance. He climbed steeply. His fighter surged upward. At 14:35, he reached 3,000 meters. He looked around. The sky was mostly empty. The American bombers had already passed. But then he saw one, single B-17, flying alone, low altitude, heading northwest. Stigler turned toward it. He opened the throttle. His fighter accelerated. Within 2 minutes, he was behind the B-17. He closed to firing range, 200 meters. He armed his weapons. The cannon was loaded. The machine guns were loaded. His gun sight was on. He looked at the B-17 through his gun sight and saw devastation. The tail was shredded. The tail gunner's position was destroyed. He could see right through it. No gunner there, dead or gone. The waist was shot up, windows broken. guns hanging uselessly, no apparent defensive fire capability. The ball turret was destroyed, completely gone, just wreckage. The right side of the fuselage had massive holes. He could see inside the aircraft, see the internal structure, see daylight through the other side. The number 2 engine was dead, propeller windmilling. Number 4 was trailing smoke. The nose was gone, just gone. The entire plexiglass nose section was shot away. He could see into the cockpit, see the pilots sitting there, see them looking back at him. This aircraft was not a threat. It was not even really flying. It was falling slowly, barely controlled, held aloft by momentum and desperation. Shooting it would not be combat. It would be murder. Stigler pulled alongside, 50 meters away. He looked directly at the pilot, made eye contact. The American pilot, young, maybe 20 years old, looked terrified. Stigler waved, not aggressively, just waved, trying to communicate, "I see you, I understand." Brown, in the B-17 cockpit, did not understand. He thought the German was signaling him to land, to surrender. Brown shook his head. No, he would not land in Germany. He would not surrender. He would fly this aircraft to England or die trying. Stigler understood Brown's gesture. He flew closer. 30 meters away, he pointed northwest, pointed in the direction Brown was already flying, the direction to the North Sea, to freedom. Brown still did not understand. He thought maybe the German was directing him to land at a different airfield. He shook his head again. No. Stigler realized communication was failing. The American did not understand. But that was okay. Stigler would simply escort him, make sure no other German fighters attacked, make sure anti-aircraft batteries did not fire, protect this crippled bomber until it reached safety. But there was a problem. If Stigler stayed with the B-17, flying formation with an American bomber, other German pilots might see, might report it. He would be court-martialed, executed for treason. Helping an enemy aircraft was the worst possible offense. Stigler decided he did not care. He would do what was right. Honor mattered more than regulations. For the next 30 minutes, Franz Stigler flew formation with Charlie Brown's crippled B-17. They flew together across northern Germany, a German fighter protecting an American bomber, enemies flying as wingmen. At 14:45, they approached the coast. German anti-aircraft batteries below prepared to fire. Gunners saw the B-17, an easy target, low altitude, slow, damaged. They aimed. Stigler flew directly between the anti-aircraft guns and the bomber. He blocked their line of fire. He waggled his wings, the signal for "Don't shoot" friendly aircraft. The gunners saw his Bf-109, saw the German markings. They held fire. They were confused. Why was a German fighter protecting an American bomber? But they did not shoot. At 14:52, they crossed the German coast. Over the North Sea now. International waters. Brown's B-17 was safe from German anti-aircraft fire. But it still needed to reach England, still needed to survive the ocean crossing. Stigler flew alongside for another 2 minutes. At 14:54, he looked at Brown one last time, nodded, then broke formation. He rolled his Bf-109 into a sharp turn and headed back toward Germany, back to his airfield, back to his squadron. He landed at 15:08. Ground crew met him. They asked about his patrol. He said nothing. He filed a brief report. Encountered enemy bomber. Broke off engagement. No details. No mention of the escort. No mention of what he had done. He never told anyone about that day. Not his squadron mates. Not his commanding officers. not his family after the war. He kept it secret for 46 years. Brown continued flying northwest. At 1500, they were well over the North Sea. At 1520, they sighted England. At 1538, they spotted their home airfield at Kimbolton. But they could not land there. The landing gear would not extend. The hydraulics were destroyed. They would have to belly land, crash land on the runway without wheels. Brown circled the field. He wanted to give his crew time to prepare, time to brace for impact. At 1545, he lined up on the runway. He cut the throttles. The dying engines quit. Ye Old Pub descended in silence. At 1547, the bomber touched down. Belly first. Metal screaming on concrete, sparks showering. The aircraft slid 1,500 feet down the runway. Slowing, finally stopping. Brown sat in the cockpit. Engine off. Aircraft stopped. Home. Safe. They had survived. The crew evacuated quickly. Those who could walk helped those who could not. The wounded were taken to medical facilities immediately. The dead were removed with dignity. Ground crew examined Ye Old Pub. They counted damage, over 100 bullet and shrapnel holes. Tail section destroyed. Nose section destroyed. Ball turret destroyed. 2 engines destroyed. 1 engine barely functional. Hydraulic system destroyed. Electrical system barely functioning. Control cables severed or damaged. Fuel tanks leaking. The maintenance officer looked at the damage and shook his head. He could not understand how this aircraft had flown. By all engineering calculations, it should have fallen from the sky over Germany. But somehow, impossibly, it had made it home. Brown filed his mission report. He described the bombing run over Bremen, described the fighter attacks, described the damage, and then he described something that troubled him deeply. Bf 109 pilot approached, but did not fire. Flew formation with us for approximately 30 minutes. Escorted us to coast, then departed. Do not understand why he did not shoot us down. The intelligence officer read the report. He had no explanation. German fighters did not escort American bombers to safety. This made no sense. Perhaps Brown was mistaken. Perhaps the German's guns had jammed. Perhaps the German had run out of ammunition. Brown insisted, no, his guns worked. He could have shot us down easily. He chose not to. He saved us. The intelligence officer noted this in his report but remained skeptical. Such things did not happen in war. Brown was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross for bringing his crew home despite catastrophic damage. His co-pilot, Spencer Luke, received commendation for saving Brown's life. The surviving crew members received Purple Hearts for wounds sustained in combat. But Brown could not stop thinking about the German pilot. The man who had killed him but chose not to. The man who had violated orders, risked his own life to protect an enemy. Brown did not even know the pilot's name, did not know if he was still alive, did not know how to find him. For 46 years, Brown wondered, who was that German pilot? Why did he not shoot? What made him different? The war ended in May 1945. Germany surrendered. The Luftwaffe was disbanded. Fighter pilots like Franz Stigler became civilians again. Stigler survived the war with 28 confirmed victories. He emigrated to Canada in 1953. He became a successful businessman in Vancouver. He never told anyone about December 20th, 1943. Brown also survived the war. He left the Air Force in 1945. He returned to civilian life in West Virginia. He married. He raised a family. He became a civilian once more. But he never forgot the German pilot. In 1986, 43 years after that day, Brown decided to try to find the German pilot. He was now 64 years old. Time was running short. If he was going to find this man, it had to be soon. Brown began researching. He contacted German fighter pilot associations. He wrote letters to former Luftwaffe pilots. He described the incident. December 20th, 1943, Northern Germany, Bf-109 escorted B-17 to safety. Most recipients of his letters had no information. Some thought he was crazy. Some thought he was making it up. But Brown persisted. In January 1990, Brown placed a notice in a newsletter for German fighter pilots. He described the incident. He asked, "Does anyone know who this pilot was?" Franz Stigler, now 74 years old, living in Vancouver, subscribed to this newsletter. In January 1990, he received the issue with Brown's notice. He read it, and his heart stopped. That was him. That was his story. After 46 years of silence, someone was looking for him. Stigler hesitated. Should he respond? What if Brown was angry? What if Brown blamed him for not shooting down his bomber sooner, before his crew members died? What if this reopened old wounds? But Stigler decided to write. He sent a letter to Brown. He identified himself, Franz Stigler, former Oberleutnant, JG-27, December 20th, 1943, Northern Germany, Bf-109. Brown received the letter in February 1990. He read it with shaking hands. This was the man. After 46 years, he had found him. Brown called Stigler immediately. They spoke for the first time since that day. Brown's first words, "You saved my life." Stigler's response, "I could not shoot you. You were already dead. Shooting you would have been murder, not combat." They talked for hours. They shared memories of that day. They filled in details neither had known. They cried. Two old men, former enemies, connected across decades by a moment of mercy. In June 1990, Brown flew to Vancouver. He met Stigler in person. They embraced, not as enemies, as brothers. They spent a week together. They talked constantly. They shared their lives. Brown learned that Stigler had been a man of honor even in war. Stigler learned that Brown had carried gratitude for 46 years. They became close friends. They visited each other regularly. They attended air shows together. They gave joint interviews. They told their story to anyone who would listen. In 2008, a book about their story was published. A Higher Call by Adam Makos. The book documented everything. The mission over Bremen. The damage to Ye Old Pub. The moment when Stigler chose mercy over victory. The 46-year search. The reunion. The book became a bestseller. Their story reached millions of people. It became one of the most famous stories of World War II. A story of humanity in warfare. A story of honor transcending national boundaries. A story of two warriors who found brotherhood. Franz Stigler died March 22, 2008, at age 92. He died knowing his story had been told, knowing his choice had been recognized, knowing he had done the right thing. Charlie Brown died November 24, 2008, 8 months after Stigler, at age 87. He died grateful. Grateful that Stigler had spared him. Grateful that they had found each other. Grateful for 18 years of friendship after so many years of wondering. Their story endures. It teaches something fundamental about war and humanity. Wars are fought between nations, between armies, between political systems. But they are fought by individuals, men and women who carry their own codes, their own ethics, their own humanity. Franz Stigler carried a code taught to him by Gustav Rödel. Never shoot a defenseless enemy. On December 20th, 1943, He faced a choice: follow orders and shoot down an easy kill, earning Germany's highest decoration, or follow his code and spare a defenseless crew. He chose his code. He chose mercy. He chose humanity. That choice cost him the Knight's Cross. It cost him recognition and glory. It could have cost him his life if discovered, but it earned him something more valuable: the respect of the man whose life he saved, and the knowledge that he had acted with honor. Charlie Brown understood this. He understood that Stigler had risked everything to save American lives, not because Americans were friends, but because murder is wrong, because shooting defenseless men is dishonorable, because some principles transcend warfare. This is the lesson of their story. Even in war, humanity survives. Even when nations are enemies, individuals can choose compassion. Even when orders demand killing, honor can demand mercy. The B-17 Ye Olde Pub was scrapped after the war. It was too damaged to repair. It served its purpose. It brought its crew home one final time, and then was retired. The Messerschmitt Bf-109 that Stigler flew that day also survived the war. It may still exist in a museum somewhere, or it may have been scrapped, but its legacy endures in the story of what its pilot chose not to do. 2 aircraft, 1 American, 1 German, 1 bomber, 1 fighter. They flew together for 30 minutes over enemy territory. Then they separated. 1 went home to England, 1 went home to Germany, and 46 years later, their pilots finally met again. This is not a typical war story. There is no victory here, no conquest, no medals for bravery in combat. Instead, there is something rarer, something more valuable. There is a moment when a warrior chose humanity over duty, when a fighter pilot became something greater than a killer. Franz Stigler could have shot down Ye Olde Pub in 5 seconds. 1 burst from his cannon would have destroyed the crippled bomber. 10 men would have died. Stigler would have earned the Knight's Cross. His career would have advanced. His reputation would have grown. Instead, he escorted his enemy to safety. He protected American lives at risk to his own. He violated orders, betrayed his duty, endangered his career. For what? For honor. For a code that said some things matter more than victory. This decision defines heroism in a way that most war stories do not. Heroism is not just courage in combat. It is not just risking your life for your comrades. It is choosing right over easy, choosing humanity over hatred, choosing mercy when killing would be simpler. Franz Stigler was a hero, not because he shot down 28 aircraft, but because he refused to shoot down number 29. Charlie Brown was also a hero, not just for bombing Bremen, not just for bringing his crew home despite catastrophic damage, but for carrying gratitude across 46 years, for searching until he found the man who saved him, for becoming friends with a former enemy. Their friendship demonstrates something profound. Enemies can become brothers. Warriors can find peace. Nations may fight, but individuals can forgive. In our time, this lesson feels urgent. We live in a world of divisions: political, religious, national, racial. We are told constantly that those who are different are dangerous, that those on the other side are enemies, that compromise is weakness, and mercy is foolishness. The story of Franz Stigler and Charlie Brown refutes this. They were enemies: Luftwaffe fighter pilot and USAAF bomber pilot, German and American, sworn to destroy each other. Yet when the moment came, Stigler chose mercy, and Brown honored that choice with 46 years of gratitude and 18 years of friendship. If these 2 warriors, in the middle of history's deadliest war, could choose humanity over hatred, then surely we can do the same. If a German pilot could spare American lives, and an American pilot could forgive German actions, then surely we can find common ground with those we consider different. This is not naive. This is not ignoring real conflicts. Franz Stigler and Charlie Brown did not pretend the war did not exist. They did not deny that Germany and America were enemies. They acknowledged reality, but they chose to be more than their nation's proxies. They chose to be human beings who recognized humanity in each other. On December 20th, 1943, at 3,000 meters over northern Germany, Franz Stigler looked at a crippled American bomber and saw not a target, not a statistic, not an enemy, but men. Young men, bleeding men, dying men, men who deserved mercy even though they wore enemy uniforms. And he gave them that mercy. He escorted them to safety. He saved their lives. And in doing so, he saved something else. He saved the idea that honor exists even in war, that humanity survives even in combat, that some principles transcend national boundaries. 46 years later, when they finally met, Brown asked Stigler, "Why did you not shoot?" Stigler's answer was simple. Because it would have been wrong. Not strategically wrong, not tactically wrong, morally wrong. Shooting defenseless men, even enemy men, even in war, would violate a code that mattered more than victory. This code still exists. It exists in military cultures worldwide. Rules of engagement, laws of war, Geneva Conventions. These rules say that even in combat, there are limits. Some actions are prohibited, even against enemies. Shooting prisoners, targeting civilians, using certain weapons. These rules exist because humanity insists that even in war, we remain human. That even when killing is necessary, murder is not. That even when nations fight, individuals have responsibilities to universal principles. Franz Stigler embodied this. He could have been a simple killer. He had the skill. He had the opportunity. He had orders. But he was more than that. He was a warrior with a code. And when his code conflicted with his duty, he chose his code. This choice should be remembered. It should be celebrated. It should be taught to every person who wears a uniform, who carries a weapon, who has power over others' lives. Because power without principle is tyranny. Strength without honor is cruelty. Victory without humanity is empty. The story of Franz Stigler and Charlie Brown is not just history. It is a moral lesson. A lesson about who we are and who we can be. A lesson that even in our darkest moments, we can choose light. Even when hatred seems reasonable, we can choose compassion. Even when violence is expected, we can choose mercy. This lesson matters today as much as it did in 1943, perhaps more, because we face choices daily about how we treat those different from us, how we respond to those we consider enemies, how we balance duty and humanity. Franz Stigler faced that choice at 1437 on December 20th, 1943. He chose humanity. And that choice echoes across 80 years, reminding us that we too can choose to be more than our circumstances demand. We too can choose mercy over vengeance. We too can choose to see humanity in those we are taught to hate. This is their legacy. This is what they teach us. Not that war is glorious, not that combat is noble, but that even in war, even in combat, we remain human. And humanity, when we choose it, can transcend even the deadliest conflicts. Franz Stigler and Charlie Brown, a German fighter pilot and an American bomber pilot, enemies who became brothers, warriors who found peace, men who proved that mercy is stronger than hatred. Their story is a gift, a reminder, a challenge. It asks us, when faced with your own moment of choice, will you choose duty or humanity? Will you follow orders or follow your code? Will you kill because you can or spare because you should? Franz Stigler answered that question. His answer saved 10 American lives. His answer earned Charlie Brown's eternal gratitude. His answer became a story told around the world. What will your answer be?